revisions or adjustments? Seeing none, the minutes are adopted as entered. The first item before the committee. Can you hear me? First item before the committee is Senate File 441. Senator Coleman. Welcome to the committee, Senator. Senate File 441 is in front of us, and I think you have an author's amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, yes, I have author's amendment, the A1, which simply corrects an error that was referring to the wrong piece of statute.
Senator Putnam offers the A1 amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Amendment is adopted. Senator Coleman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members, I apologize for my voice. The Petri dish of preschool has claimed its most recent victim, but I will try my best here. This bill has to do with tax credits for solar installations in both residential and businesses. Residents living in investor-owned utility territories like Xcel Energy and Minnesota Power benefit from a utility-run incentive that is applied on a customer's energy bill. This legislation would only apply to customers of municipal utilities or cooperative electric associations to give them the same type of benefit as those IOU customers. These credits provide people in greater Minnesota with the ability to invest in their own homes and businesses and provide greater incentives for private investment in all of Minnesota, regardless of utility territory. Installing solar allows Minnesotans to invest in their own property, home, or business and to take control of their own energy bills. Just a brief overview of the different divisions. Subdivision 1, the definitions, the only thing I want to point out there is definition F, which limits the underlying tax credit to 40 kilowatts or under, which aligns with net metering limitations in cooperative and municipal utility territory and ensures that this bill is targeting small residential and commercial solar installations. In subdivision 2, this bill provides a temporary refundable income tax credit over the next 4 years for the installation of a solar energy system in a given tax year. The credit would be available to both businesses and homeowners, lesser of the applicable percentage of purchase and installation costs or maximum credit. In each year it is effective, the maximum credit percentage of the system's value decreases from 15% for 2025 to 13% for 2026, then 11% for the remaining 2 years. Depending on the size of the solar system installed, this bill would provide a maximum tax credit of $2,500 for a homeowner or up to $15,000 for a business. Lastly, in subdivision 3, it makes a tax credit refundable for lower-income Minnesota residents who choose to install solar, whose taxes exceed the value of the credit, and increases the breadth of Minnesotans who may be able to make this investment. I thank you very much for the time and consideration of this bill today. Lowering energy bills is one of the best ways to put money back into the pockets of Minnesotans, do our part to be more environmentally friendly, and gives Minnesotans tax credits that will allow greater investment in their homes and businesses while lowering their energy bill, and I believe is a great use of this committee's time. Thank you for your consideration. I do have a couple of testifiers with me today, Mr. Chair, if it's all right.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. I have Logan O'Grady. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and members. For the record, my name is Logan O'Grady. I am the Executive Director of the Minnesota Solar Energy Industries Association. We don't often have the privilege of appearing before this committee. We spend most of our time in front of Senator Frentz's committee, so it's great to be here. For those who might not know much about my organization, MNSEA is a 501c6 nonprofit trade association. We represent over 170 other organizations, mostly solar installers and developers who are within all of your districts helping your constituents put solar on their properties. I want to just quickly thank Senator Coleman for carrying this legislation. This has been a multi-year effort, and really commend her for listening to her constituents who are asking for more opportunities. And I think that's really what this legislation is about, is opportunity. What we know is in Minnesota, if you live in the metro area, or if you live within an Xcel Energy or Minnesota Power territory, you have an option and a tool in your toolbox to help you fund and finance solar energy projects on your home. That opportunity is not the same for those who live in rural electric cooperative territories or greater Minnesota. I would be remiss if I did not also talk about the opportunity that this creates for the businesses within my industry. So part of my job as a trade organization representative is to travel the country and talk about how great Minnesota is, and I know that you all share that opinion. You know, I highlight why businesses should expand or grow here in Minnesota over 49 other markets that they have to choose from. And I list things like our, amazing workforce, our amazing school districts, our commitment to the outdoors. But the first question that people always ask me after I make that list is, what are the incentives that your state offers? And when I'm in a place like Iowa, who has a state level tax credit similar to the one in this bill, I want to say, yeah, we have that too, but I can't until this legislation passes. And so I agree with Senator Coleman that this would be a great use of this committee's time and a good market signal to those businesses that are looking to expand their operations here in Minnesota. I can stick around for questions if needed, but thank you again. And
Thank you, Mr. O'Grady. I have Patty O'Keefe and Bobby King, if they can come to the table. They're in the room.
Thank you.
Ms. O'Keefe, welcome to the committee. Please introduce yourself and proceed.
Hello, Chair and members. Thanks for the opportunity to testify today in support of this bill. My name is Patty O'Keefe. I'm the Midwest Regional Director for Vote Solar, and for Vote Solar, for 25 years, Vote Solar has worked at the state level where most energy decisions are made to accelerate the transition to solar. So at its core, this bill is giving Minnesotans the tools that they need to harness the power of the sun, all while reducing energy costs, creating jobs, and strengthening our energy independence. After passing the 100% carbon-free energy standard by 2040, we're going to need every tool in the toolbox to achieve that goal. Passing policies that incentivize more solar is one of those tools. While solar is the cheapest form of energy per kilowatt hour, the upfront costs of installation remain a key barrier for many. This tax credit will break down that barrier, empowering everyday Minnesotans to make a smart investment in their energy future. With every solar installation, we're creating jobs that can't be outsourced. Minnesota's clean energy economy already supports over 57,000 jobs, and this bill will help grow that number by spurring demand for solar installers, electricians, and manufacturing workers. These aren't just jobs, they're careers that provide pathways to economic mobility for workers across the state. Today, Minnesota spends over $1 billion every year importing energy from other states. I remember when I first learned that, and my jaw dropped. I was like, that's a lot of money. That's money leaving our communities instead of being invested here at home. Solar offers a different path, one where we generate our own energy locally. Unlike other forms of energy, solar has no fuel costs. Once panels are installed, they keep producing power at a stable, predictable cost for decades. With every solar installation, we're not just cutting energy bills, we're keeping more money circulating in Minnesota's economy. For businesses operating in tight margins, the savings from solar can mean the difference between staying afloat or shutting their doors. By supporting policies like these, we can empower people to produce their own energy, reduce strain on the grid, and meet the state's growing energy demands. It's a win-win for Minnesota's economy, environment, and energy independence. Members of the committee, I urge you to support this bill and help Minnesota continue its leadership in the transition to solar. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. O'Keefe. Mr. King, please introduce yourself and proceed.
Mr. Chair, Committee, my name is Bobby King. I'm the Minnesota State Director for Solar United Neighbors. We're a national nonprofit that works here in Minnesota to help people go solar through education, and we also do buying groups where people come together and leverage their buying power to get the best deal from an installer. And we have a real focus on working outside of the Twin Cities. We've always do 2 or 3 buying groups in rural Minnesota. We've just had recent meetings in Morris, Moorhead, and Fergus Falls, and are working out there now. In rural Minnesota, it can be often difficult to get a bid, much less some competitive bids. So I just want to thank Senator Coleman for carrying this bill. And I think that focus on muni and rural electric cooperative territory is important. We do group buy here in the Twin Cities too, and during our PowerPoint, when we go through incentives, it's 6, 7, 8 PowerPoints on the different incentives folks in the Twin Cities area can take advantage of, but as soon as we get out to rural Minnesota, it's a slide. So giving folks an opportunity to tap into an incentive like this, I think, is important and will allow more people to go solar. And the other thing it will do is installers will often organize where they're looking for business and prioritize bids in areas where there are incentives. So I think it'll increase some competition in rural communities. So three things would happen, really. The competition would help lower prices for rural folks. It would offset some of the upfront costs for folks. And a lot of the people we're working with are farmers, small business, and long-term homeowners who are looking at locking in their energy price as they figure out how to move forward on a fixed income in a retirement, or as a business that's looking to lower input costs. So the other piece of the bill that we strongly support and are glad to see in there is the refundable aspect for farmers during lean years. That's great, you know, and then also for lower income homeowners who might not have the tax burden to take it all in 1 year. That's really important. So we support this. Thank the committee for hearing it, and Senator Coleman for bringing it forward.
Thank you, Mr. King. I'd point out to members that their revenue estimate came in late. I'm not sure it's in your packets, but it is maybe on top of your packets. And the tax credit costs $15 million in 2026 and escalates up to $36.5 million in 2029. Any questions or comments from the committee? Senator Dibble.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is to whomever would like to respond, whether it's Mr. O'Grady or Senator Coleman. Great bill, and as a matter of fact, I was asked to sign on to it, which I hadn't yet indicated my desire to do so. So I'll talk to you later.
Absolutely.
I think I'd like to do that. But you know, the question is, this bill I think has been around. I think another senator introduced it last year, and it did get a little bit of traction last year. And I remember the discussion at the time was it was designed to work in tandem, or one of the ideas is to have this tax credit complement what we find in the Inflation Reduction Act, where I just Googled. I see that there's a very similar tax credit for solar installation for residential and business. But we know that in the flurry of executive orders from President Trump, all of the funding and the grants and the like for what he calls, you know, the Green New Deal. But, you know, it's a pretty good deal if we got, you know, 5,000 or more people employed in this industry in Minnesota. You know, so that's going to come to a screeching halt if that is something that he's legally allowed to do, which there's a question about that. So my question is this bill still a good idea? If it's not working in tandem, are we looking to substitute this tax credit for what the federal government is going to stop doing? And or have we assessed the effect of the cessation of these kinds of tax credits on the industry and in our ability to reach the 100% standard that we have now in Minnesota?
We have that question for Mr. O'Grady. Mr. O'Grady.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Senator Dibble, for the question. I might be biased, but yes, I think it is still a good idea. This would be applied on your state level tax refund, right? And the federal one would have been applied on your federal. But I think your broader question is the impact on federal decisions recently. I think for any industry, our policies and regulations should not swing with an election. I think our industry, like any other industry, likes predictability and stability across political spheres. And so I think right now it's not a super fun time for our industry. We're very concerned. We're working in coordination with our parent company, SEIA, the Solar Energy Industries Association, which is our federal parent company that does all the federal lobbying. I think they have a good plan. I think what their plan is to really highlight American-made energy, and that is what this is. It's people buying into an energy system where they self-produce and self-consume their own energy. So it will definitely hurt, I think, as our members, and maybe perhaps Mr. King can speak more to this, but are out there trying to market this product to consumers. The fact that they can't say that they have a federal incentive now will definitely hurt them. But I try not to be too doom and gloom, and I think that, like anything else, this transition is happening, whether people like it or not. So,
Any follow-up, Senator Dibble?
Thank you. So I agree with you. It's still a good idea. I want to come onto the bill and support Senator Coleman in this effort. But you started with an interesting statement. Policies shouldn't vary and swing with the elections. I think the point to think about is that elections do matter and policies do change. And there may be a real consequence to our state's economy as a consequence of the elimination of the Inflation Reduction Act. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Further questions or comments from the committee? Senator Coleman, any closing comments?
Not particularly, Mr. Chair, but would just like to thank everyone for their time and consideration today and for all the testifiers for working with me, moving everything up. I have some constituents coming in, so thanks to the committee for doing that too.
Thank you, Senator Coleman. Senate File 441, as amended, is laid over for possible inclusion. Senator Abeler.
Sorry.
Oh, you're fine. You can stay.
I just don't know you want me
You're going to be seen with me. I don't know.
Welcome to the committee, Senator Abeler. Senate File 219 is in front of us. Go ahead.
Oh, thanks you, Mr. Chair and members. It's sometimes it's good to have a bill that doesn't cost any money that actually will do some good that make people happy. Last year, we established a $2 million fund for e-bike rebates, and to say it was popular is to not really have a strong enough word about popular. And so it was, in my testifier, I'll give you the specifics, but but anyway, the money didn't last very long. And so it was set up on a first come, first served basis. And if you ever flown Southwest, if you don't call at the right time, you're going to wind up in the D section of the line. And actually, what people found out, if they didn't call soon enough, they wouldn't even get on the airplane. This actually converts it to a lottery. And 40% is reserved for people who have a greater need. And I think this will make this program much more functional. It also asks the department to come back with a report. The revenue note is zero. They didn't comment if there's a cost for the report, maybe because they didn't mention it, there's not. But that's the bill, Mr. Chair, and I have a testifier, Madam Chair, sorry. Good morning. Anyway, so I have a testifier, and then he can offer a few thoughts, and then we'll stand for questions.
Good morning, Chair. Good morning, members. My name is CJ Linder. I'm the Education Manager with the Bicycle Alliance of Minnesota. We're a 501c3 nonprofit education organization. We supported the original e-bike rebate program because we recognize the tremendous potential for electric assist bicycles to offer mobility at a lower cost and greater efficiency than basically any other mode. The rebate program, as you heard Senator Abeler say, was tremendously popular. We had about 77 times more applicants online for the first come, first serve line for a chance to have a rebate to offset some of the costs to purchase a new electric assist bicycle. And unfortunately, due to the wording from the original bill, that process was neither smooth nor equitable. So it was just up to luck whether somebody was at the front of the line and clicked within 15 seconds, all of the available dollars were allocated. So even those who were online and at the right second, I know myself and several others thought we were in line at the right time and weren't able to access those funds. So the proposition in front of us is simply to convert the process from a first come, first serve to a lottery to allow for a more fair and equitable opportunity for Minnesotans to partake in the rebate program. And then, as you heard, also generate a report on how this process can be improved if there's funding in the future. So, happy to answer any questions or.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks, Senator Abeler, for bringing this. I just have two questions. One, Just merely curious, have you had a chance to talk to Senator Fate about this? I think he brought the legislation before, and just wondering if you've had any of those conversations, and if not, that's okay. Just curious.
Well, and just to tell you, I'm new to this topic. This was brought to me, I thought, oh, that's a great idea. And I sometimes you step on things not knowing what you're getting into. He is my seatmate.
Yeah.
And so I was going to have him sign on to the bill. So, but I didn't mean to step on him at all, and I just admit ignorance on that, so.
Yeah,
Maybe
merely
he'll
curious.
want to change his seat after this, but,
I figured you'd be talking to him, so I appreciate that. The second thing, I do, appreciate the changes, and I do note that you're designating 40% for what would be considered, lower, possibly lower income. Just curious where you why you landed on the 40%, and if you've thought about the possibility of increasing that so that more rebates go to folks that maybe can't afford electric bikes.
Senator Abeler.
thanks, Madam Chair and Senator. That actually is the existing part of the program, which Senator Fate set up. So
Okay, thank you.
All we're changing is to go from 15 seconds, can you believe it?
Got it.
To 16 seconds, sorry, you're late. But anyway, just from that to a lottery. And I believe it preserves all the intent that
Okay.
people had in mind. So, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Abeler.
Okay. I'm sorry. Senator Drazkowski, then Senator Nelson, then I'll come back to you, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Abeler, I think your mechanics are good. It's probably an improvement over the process we've had. I don't like this program. I think it should go away. Do we know so this wasn't just a one-time thing. These appropriations were part of our base going forward. Is that right? And if so, how much is it?
Madam
Senator
Chair,
Abeler.
Senator Drazkowski, actually, it's one-time money. It was a $2 million and $2 million. The program was undersubscribed because I think like 85% of the people that got the rebate thing actually spent it. And so I believe the extra money is going to roll forward, but it's a $2 million one more time thing, and then that's the end unless it's funded.
So,
Senator Drazkowski.
thank you, Madam Chair. So Senator Abeler, so there's one more year left in 2026.
Senator Abeler.
Madam Chair, 25. Senator, it's 2025. There's one more year this year now. That was last year and then this year.
So the
Then that's
program
the end.
expires on, Madam Chair?
Go ahead, Senator.
So the program expires on June 30th of 2025. Is that correct?
Chair, Senator, when the money is allocated for this current season, then the program will be expired. So there's one more enrollment period that'll start on July 1st. That money will be allocated one more time, either through first come, first serve, or through a lottery if we're successful in changing this, if this bill is able to pass. And then at that point, there will be no continued funding unless there is new legislation.
So, Madam Chair?
Senator Drazkowski.
So, Madam Chair, it sounds like that at least the decisions are going to be made around this program in the planning biennium. So I'm guessing the appropriation counts in that biennium as well? Is that correct? Do we know?
Ms. Pollock, do you know, or should we have the department come up?
Maybe Casey.
Or Mr. Munn?
Madam Chair, Senator Drazkowski, there was a $4 million appropriation in the 2023 transportation bill. And it was a one-time program that's not ongoing, so it will not be counted as part of any base budget for the upcoming biennium.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Well.
Sure. Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Abeler, it appears to me this is a policy bill, a pure policy bill, because if I understand correctly, it simply just changes the first come, first serve to a lottery and requires a report. It seems to me the only unknown thing is what the cost of the report might be and who might prepare it. But my questions are just trying to understand the target that this bill is aiming for. So it's a one-time fund, I believe, that was $2 million, or $2 million was issued. How much is left of the appropriation that this bill might be able to apply to?
Senator
Madam Chair,
Abrams?
I can just take a stab at it. The department would know exactly, I would think about $250,000 or so, based upon,
Well, so 2 million was allocated for last
Right.
enrollment, 2 million new dollars for this, plus whatever the unsubscribed amount was.
yeah, and I believe there was 85% uptake
Sir,
or
if you're going
something.
to
Oh, I'm sorry.
testify, you have to address the chair.
Sorry for that.
Not the person sitting next to you, okay?
Sorry for that. Chair, Senator, the amount that we're looking at is another $2 million for the July 1st enrollment period, and then whatever remainder was left from the unsubscribed portion last year.
Senator Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So then I think you've answered the question. 2 million in the upcoming appropriation, plus it looks like there's 200,000 left from the current. So we're about $2.2 million is what we're talking about. That's what I wanted to know. And also I wanted to know, what about the unclaimed? It looks like there's 200 unclaimed certificates from this year, I guess, or from 2024. What happens to those? And do those people go to the, I don't know, what happens to those people that have those unclaimed certificates from 2024?
Senator Abeler?
Chair, Senator, the unclaimed rebates
Just a moment,
expired.
I need to make sure I have your name. Mr. Linder.
Thank you, Chair. The rebate certificates that were issued did expire. I believe that was about 30 days after they were issued if they weren't claimed. And so that the rebates are no longer valid, and that funding goes back into the pool to be reallocated.
Thank you. You've answered my questions.
Senator Abeler?
I think another member had a question.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Senator Barr, then Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, is this, we laying this over, or are we laying this over, or is this got another stop?
It's been requested by the Committee on Transportation, so we are open to a motion after the testimony and after the questions. And if that motion is successful, it will go to the Committee on Transportation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Senator Abeler, maybe I missed it in here someplace, but I don't see like a date when the lottery is supposed to be. I mean, if you're going to do a lottery, there should be an applied date, when you have to apply and the lottery's closed, and then when the checks will be issued. So maybe between now and transportation, you can address that, unless I missed it in here.
Senator Abeler?
Madam Chair, I think that's a very constructive piece of advice. We will take that seriously.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all I have.
Senator Miller?
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Abeler or Mr. Lindor, I'm familiar with electronic bicycles. I don't have one myself. I have a regular bicycle. I don't have an electronic one, but I see a lot of them buzzing around town these days. I'm curious if you can share just what the average cost is of an electronic bicycle, and then what the average rebate was for someone who purchased an electronic bicycle.
Mr. Lindor?
Madam Chair, Senator, I can't tell you the exact average. I can tell you that the range is great. They can be purchased for as low as a few $100s, $300 to $400, up to over $10,000 for, and the same is actually true for analog bikes, and basically the same range, or non-electric spied bikes. I think the average is probably about $2,000. That price is coming down pretty rapidly as the technology develops and improves. The maximum award amount from this bill was $1,500 to any individual, and that was a proportion of the retail price of the bike. So if the bike was $1,000, the award amount was between 50 to 75%, scaled based on income.
Any other questions? Senator Miller?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Lindor, that $10,000 electric bicycle, what's the approximate miles per hour? How fast can those things go?
Madam Chair, Senator Miller. In Minnesota, we recognize a 3-class bicycle system. We have a Class 1 bicycle that can go up to 20 miles an hour with pedal assist. We have a Class 2 classification that can use a throttle assist to achieve up to 20 miles per hour. And we have a Class 3 bicycle that can go up to 28 miles an hour with pedal assist only, no throttle. Generally speaking, those are all considered to be bicycles and can operate where a bicycle can. Some jurisdictions or trails do restrict the bicycles that are on them based on their class system. So Class 3s might be excluded from trails that are shared with pedestrians, for example. But that's a matter of individual jurisdictions setting their rules.
And Madam Chair, I'm sorry, I'm very curious about
Senator
this.
Miller.
Maybe this is more of a transportation-related question, but do these electronic bicycles have to get licensed?
Madam Chair, Senator Miller, an electric assist bicycle as defined in the class system is treated like a bicycle and so is not subject to the classification. What we do see, and we have separate legislation pending, is about things that are marketed or described as e-bikes that do not fit the classification system, that exceed the power or speed limits set therein. Those vehicles would be subject to regulations, including licensure. And so that's a different subject.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Senator Dibble?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd love to expand on this discussion, but we'll have it in transportation if the motion is successful, and I'm happy to make the motion when the time is appropriate.
Is there any further discussion? We have Senator Dibble's motion in front of us. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion prevails, and Senate File 219 will be referred to the Committee on Transportation.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and members. We're going to go hit the bike lane.
The next bill, Senator Kreun. Senate File 378. Welcome to the committee, Senator Kreun. You may begin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. It's nice to be back in the tax committee. I will do a walkthrough of my bill and then some general comments on why I think it's important. Then I'll hand it over to my testifier. Senate File 378, the bill itself is not terribly complicated. Section 1 of the bill in Part A establishes the amateur sports account for the sales tax revenue that I will describe in Section 2. The funds are appropriated to the commission for deferred maintenance costs at the National Sports Center in Blaine. Lines 111 to 112 identify the standard to determine whether the deferred maintenance costs exist. My understanding is that the Minnesota Enterprise Real Property Facilities Condition Assessment, which is identified there, put out annually by the Department of Administration, is the dispositive publication to determine deferred maintenance on our state-owned assets. So that's why that was included. Part B of Section 1 describes the triggering mechanism to determine the timing of whether or not sales tax revenue will be deposited into the account for the upcoming fiscal year. And then, Madam Chair, Section 2 of the bill is the implementation provision. We included, as an aside, the establishment of the account back in the Senate tax bill in 2023, but it did not survive conference committee, and the implementation provision was not present in that Senate tax bill. So this bill does include the implementation provision. And that's the authority for the commissioner to deposit the sales tax revenue derived from the taxes and sales and purchases made at the National Sports Center into the account, subject to Part B of Section 1, which I previously described. So that's my walkthrough of the bill, Madam Chair. I
So
think
there actually are, the only change in the policy is that establishment of an account to take the taxes that are collected and just return them to the sports center. Is that correct?
Yes, Madam Chair. If you're comparing this bill that's before you versus what we discussed back in 2023, we did add the provision in subpart B of section 1, which provides a use requirement for these funds for deferred maintenance. That was not in the tax bill in 2023. So that part is different. And then the second part that is different is that this actually has the implementation provision in it as well, which back in 2023, we just had the establishment of the account.
Senator Kreun, do you sit on the commission yourself?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, I am on the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission. I am the Senate Republican appointee, which is pursuant to statute, which is a non-voting member. The Senate Democrat designee is Senator Gustafson, who is also a co-author on my bill.
Okay. Welcome to the committee, sir. If you would state your name, and we'll welcome your testimony.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members of the committee, my name is Todd Johnson. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission. I want to thank you for the opportunity to present to you and have a discussion about what I feel is an unbelievable asset to the state of Minnesota, and I have a real privilege to be the person who is responsible for running of that facility. Unfortunately, it's 30 years old now, and the deferred maintenance is catching up with us. And thank goodness for the Department of Administration's CAPRA portion of money that the Department of Administration has for emergencies. We've been able to access that money over time, but without a bonding bill and without moving forward with some other mechanism to address the deferred maintenance issues on this campus, we're really concerned about what the future is going to look like. Over the summer, we had a task force of both the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission members, the National Sports Center Foundation members, and user groups for the facility to come up with some alternatives to figure out how to address this deferred maintenance issue for this facility. The story itself, most of you know, I've seen many of you up there. I've seen, maybe you've been up there to see your children or grandchildren play. The economic impact of this facility is second to none. It is the second largest tourist attraction in the state of Minnesota. Last year, we had nearly $100 million in economic impact from the events that we run up at the Sports Center. Unfortunately, about half of those events do take place, or fortunately, but unfortunately because of the condition, about half of those events take place in our ice rink, our eight-sheet facility, which is tied to be the largest in North America. And if you want to get real technical, we probably are the largest because of the size of our ice surface area versus the other facility in Boston. However, as many of you know, because you have ice rinks in your districts, there is a refrigerant called R22, which is now no longer legal to purchase and is used in a lot of ice rinks. The conversion is being made over to ammonia, and that is one of the projects that we have to do to address at the National Sports Center as soon as possible. Literally just had a 16-valve compressor collapse and blow up 2 weeks ago. And as I said, luckily for the CAPRA, we found a used compressor down in Texas and got it up in time. We're in the ice making business, so without the 16-valve compressor, we were in a tough position. CAPRA had the emergency funds for us. This was just $100,000, but it's a lot of money to us, and it made the difference in trying to get that ice rink running and ice in the condition that we normally like to have for our tournaments.
Madam Chair.
Senator Kreun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I would just add to that it's important for the committee to know that the assets we're talking about here are state-owned. I know there's a lot of confusion about the ownership of the National Sports Center and how it all works. But the buildings that we're talking about the deferred maintenance on are state-owned assets. I think it's also important to note that the National Sports Center receives virtually no operating funds from the state. It is almost completely self-sufficient from an operational standpoint due to creative programming that the National Sports Center puts on. And then another point, Madam Chair, the Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission and the National Sports Center, we're not asking for a subsidy to run the facility. The funds are needed to help preserve those state-owned assets that were actually given to the state way back when. And we're also not asking for money for new buildings or expanded buildings. This particular bill here, anyway, is just to maintain what we currently have. Finally, Madam Chair, as Mr. Johnson alluded to, the National Sports Center produces annually roughly $90 million, perhaps up to $100 million in economic impact to the state of Minnesota. I want to stress that this is a state asset. It's not simply because it's in the city of Blaine, an asset for Blaine or my district. This really benefits the entire state. Whenever I'm out in wherever I am and people ask me where I'm from and I say I live in Blaine, there's a very high probability the first thing they're going to say is, oh, I've been to the National Sports Center. People come from not just all over the region or the state, but literally from all over the world. There's 4 million visitors on average to the National Sports Center, and the USA Cup, which is hosted annually in the summer, is the largest amateur soccer tournament in North America. So Blaine is truly a sports recreation destination, and the National Sports Center is the anchor of that. It's a state asset with statewide impact. It's a one-of-a-kind facility in America and a valuable asset that we need to preserve. And I just appreciate you the opportunity to make those comments.
Are there questions? I'm going to start. So what you're actually asking for is to hold back for the next 4 years $1 million in tax revenue to be able to spend on the sports center, $1 million that otherwise would be going into the general fund. And then and at some point, if there is no project, I find that highly unlikely you'll find a project to spend it on. The $700,000, a biennium, that it will just cancel to the general fund. I do have a problem with that, and we know that, or as I can recall, and Ms. Pollack or Mr. Mount can refresh my memory, there is another entity that, and that is the high school league, where they have the same turnaround. They collect the tax rather than reduce their prices and asking for an exemption to the price of their tickets, and on their price of their tickets, they collect the tax and then they spend it on their own activities rather than it going into the general fund and indeed asking for an appropriation. So this is not a new concept. It is not a new way of funding something. Whether it is the correct way is the issue that the tax committee will have to decide. Just laying that out there, Mr. Johnson and Senator Kreun. Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Kuhn, I like the idea of projects that are self-funded, in a sense, on the ongoing costs here. My question is, the sales tax on merchandise is where's it going now? And because your bill, I think section 2 it is, that allows the entity to keep those sales tax dollars. And I think, did you say it was about $1 million a year? You can refresh my memory on how much it is. But my question is, who's getting those sales tax dollars now that will not be getting them if your bill passes in this state? And how do they feel about that? They can speak for themselves, but you might know already.
Senator Kreun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Nelson. As far as the dollar amount goes, it isn't a set dollar amount in the
Why?
bill. It's based on estimates in the fiscal note
I understand.
on the sales tax that is generated on
Senator
the premise.
Kreun, in the tax committee, there are revenue estimates. We don't have fiscal notes.
My apologies, Madam
That's
Chair.
okay.
I think this is the first time I've had a revenue note. It's only my second bill here in
A
the committee,
revenue
so-
estimate.
Revenue estimate. My
You know, I
apologies.
used to have this jar up here that you have to put a quarter in when people didn't know the difference between a local sales tax and an option sales tax. We'll welcome you back anytime.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Maybe a while before it feels like home, but that's all right. No, on the it's not a hard number, it's based on
Yes.
the revenue estimate, which looks like about 360,000 currently a year, so it's not, quite as high. However, to your second question, Senator Nelson, right now, the funds go into the general fund, just like any other sales tax would. And so that's the answer. So basically, what we're trying to do here, and I understand there is precedent, and it's somewhat of an unusual way to fund things, but I think the National Sports Center is a unique asset, and we are trying to be fiscally responsible in how we conduct our operations to try to be as minimally burdensome on the taxpayer as possible. And I think that over the history of the National Sports Center since 1990, we've done a quite remarkable job in not coming back to the legislature for operational money. We are self-sufficient, very creative in the programming. It's just that those assets, which Mr. Johnson can probably elaborate on, that were actually given to the state, that we're asking for help to get on top of these deferred maintenance. In the long run, if we don't do something, it's going to be more expensive than less expensive. And I know that's true for a lot of things. And this is a component to get a steady revenue stream to allow us to do that. We're looking at basically all options right now because the situation is such where we need to do something.
Senator
Follow-up.
Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I should have been maybe more specific in my question. Does Blaine have a local option sales tax?
No, that will cost you a quarter too.
Pardon me?
Just a local sales tax.
Oh, Madam Chair, how can I forget? Local option sales tax.
No, no option.
Local sales tax, no more lost.
No.
LST, got it. To my question, does it have a local sales tax? Does Blaine have a local sales tax?
No,
Oh, thank
sorry,
you.
Madam Chair.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
So the rate that's going to be applied is 6.875.
Yeah, Madam Chair, yeah, that's correct.
Senator Barr.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Johnson, this is a state-owned facility, so Department of Admin is the owner, right? It goes through there. Do you pay a lease payment to the Department of Admin on your facilities, your buildings?
Madam Chair,
Mr.
Senator,
Johnson.
no.
Thank you. That was my only question, Madam Chair. That's it.
Senator Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm a little hesitant to speak anymore in the committee, but no, I'm just kidding. I'm a frugal individual, and it's not going to cost me any money here, so I need to make sure I get it right the first time here. It's been a few years. My boys used to play soccer, so we spent a tournament or two, a weekend or two at the National Sports Center, beautiful facility. But since it has been a few years, I don't remember, is there sufficient parking space for e-bikes at the National Sports Facility?
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, Senator Miller, if there isn't, there's plenty of places where we could find a park your e-bike, regardless of what speed it goes.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Johnson, first of all, I don't know why the state has this. I guess I missed the first part of the presentation here, but so I understand there was some sort of gift or something to the state is what it sounds like for this. It sounds like it's fairly self-sufficient. Has there been anybody in the private sector interested in buying the Blaine Sports Center?
Mr. Johnson.
Madam Chair, Senator, pardon me, we've not broached that subject at all. However, if you look nationally, that has been the trend where these facilities have failed and private equity groups have come in and looked at purchasing them. It recently happened in a big facility in Mesa, Arizona, which is our competitor. In some senses, but no, there hasn't been a private group that's looking. The difference here is this is really the ice facility, and to make ice is a little different than having a soccer facility in terms of the amount of revenue that you can bring in and the amount of expense it is to maintain that facility. Pardon me, just to remind you of the history. So I'm only the second person to get the privilege actually to run this facility, and I feel pretty honored to be able to do that. My predecessor and other folks, other commissioners, some obviously senators and legislators who were on that, when those super rinks were built, it was a joint powers agreement between 2 counties, 3 or 4 cities, and some other organizations to build those facilities, and they secured a bond, and that bond on the front 4 rinks has now been paid off, and that asset then has been given to the state of Minnesota as an asset. The back 4 rinks, those bonds will defease in another year, and then that asset is completely in the hands of the state of Minnesota.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Members, I just wonder why the state of Minnesota owns things like zoos and sporting arenas. And, you know, when we get to the point where we have the reality in front of us that we've got a $5 billion projected deficit, these types of questions start to come forward, at least in my mind, and I wonder if it does in other members' mind as well. As we look at government, what are the critical functions of government? I don't think that zoos and ice arenas and soccer fields are them. But anyway, I appreciate the conversation, Mr. Johnson. It sounds like you guys run a good ship there. And if the ship runs that well, I wonder if somebody in the private sector might be interested in running the ship, and we wouldn't have to be welding the bottom when it needs welding. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, or Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you. Any further discussion or questions? Senator Dibble.
Just a brief comment. This is reminding me of a conversation that Senator Pappas is having in the Capital Investment, the Bonding Committee, in which we're asked to provide funds to improve buildings that are dilapidated and falling into disrepair. It's one thing, I mean, and in community after community, agency after agency, it's one thing when a building has become obsolete. In some cases here we see, the change in technology for the ice sheets and stuff. That's all well and fine. But the idea that she's trying to advance is that when local units of government or state agencies or, the university and colleges system are building new facilities, they're also building in a plan for the ongoing upkeep and maintenance of those so that they're not just simply relying on at some distant point in the future, coming back to this process and this entity to provide, the funding for all of that deferred and backlog of maintenance. There is now, of course, our infrastructure commission that's been established that also, other states do this far better, and so, and are requiring that if you're going to expand the enterprise, you're also going to build in the capital maintenance needs for the future. So just wanted to mention that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any further discussion? Then Senator Kreun, Do you have any final comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to thank the committee for its interest in this bill, and thank my co-authors, Senators Gustafson, Hoffman, and Abeler. Just understanding the unique situation of this is appreciated for me to tell the story of the National Sports Center and have all of you ask good, intelligent questions, and just appreciate the opportunity. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Kreun. Senate File 378, without objection, will be laid over for possible consideration in the omnibus tax bill.
Thank you.
Our next bill is Senate File 431, Senator Draheim. Welcome to the Tax Committee, and if you would take us through your bill section by section. We'll be taking a look at it. Senator Draheim. It's a short bill. Just one section.
Yeah.
So you have an easy task here, I hope. But if you would take us through the language and what your intent here is. And we do have the revenue estimate in front of us. We'll get to that after you explain it, but explain the bill.
Thank you, Chair Rest and members of the committee. I've never had as many tax bills in this being the 9th year that I have this year. So
We're where the money is.
Yes, and I don't envy the work you guys have cut out for you this session. So just a brief why this bill. I'm sure most of you have heard that we are running into problems with first responders all across the state, but it's magnified in the rural areas where most of the first responders are all volunteer. And we have a lot of volunteers that are aging out, and we don't have the younger population that is volunteering for various reasons to fill those gaps. So, we've had record number of health clinics, hospitals, pharmacies close across the state, but I think most of it's been affected in the rural areas. And I think that's relative to this conversation, that when we call 911, we expect someone to be there to help us, no matter where we're at in the state of Minnesota. And, not all of us, of course, live in the rural areas, but a lot of us travel. We might go camping, we might go fishing, we might go biking. And I think any of us have trouble, we expect to call 911 and have someone there to help us. And I think that is a core function of state government. So this is one idea that we have that we think will help in that area to ensure that we have first responders in every corner of the state to help out our citizens or our guests that are here visiting. So thank you for letting me set the stage, Chair. So when we go through this bill, it's pretty straightforward. We're going after those first responders, so volunteer fire and rescue workers would get a tax subtraction on their calculations for their federal taxes. And $10,000 for individuals, $20,000 for married couples if they both volunteer. And then there's a definition of full-time, and on the back page, or the second 2.1, of part-time workers, which state at least 40 hours during a year. And that would be for 100% volunteer, or which a lot of departments do, a paid for call program. So every time you go out on a rescue call, you get a little kind of per diem, like we get a per diem every day we show up. As we go down, we define what the full-time is, part-time, and then under 1.15, that subdivision 299N03, which I have right here, talks about what the definition is in statute of volunteer firefighter. And I have that if you want me to read it. And then in the next line, more of the emergency medical responder on 144E. And I have that, and there's two subdivisions we reference on that, just to make sure we're specifying who would qualify for this, I'll call it a tax incentive, to volunteer to be a firefighter or a first responder. I also have some letters of support that I didn't get permission to share with you guys, but I could sure read. One of the fire chiefs in my district, just as a number of quality applicants dwindle every year, and passing this bill would help us recruit new firefighters and retain the current firefighters. So that's kind of the who, what, and why we're trying to tackle this. I know funds are going to be tight in upcoming budget cycles. But when I sit here and listen to the three previous bills, and I think to myself, I have called on solar for my house in the last year. I have personally called to see if I could get, and if it would work for my home. I have checked into electric bikes. I don't qualify for any state program, but I have checked into it. And then the sports center. I've been there twice this year for tournaments, and I've probably been there twice every year for the last 12 years. What a great facility, what a great asset for the state. But our job as senators is to prioritize. And what is more important than having someone there when you call 911, no matter where you are in the state, and have someone come to help you? I think this is a key part of filling that gap. And on the revenue estimate, they do go through the numbers. I don't know, Chair, if you have these in your packets?
Yes, we do.
Okay, wonderful. With that, I'll just stand for questions.
Senator Draheim, with regard to your handouts, we just have a rule for this committee that they have to be in our office at noon the day before, so that the staff has time to set up the hearing in an orderly fashion. So if you miss the deadline, you can reference your handouts as you did, but we don't ask the staff to stay till all hours of night trying to catch up on handouts that come in afternoon the day before, particularly when both lobbyists and the authors know well in advance that their bill is going to be heard. So just pointing that out. It was not personal to you. It was that our standards and rules were just not being followed.
I understand 100%, Chair. Thank you.
I have a couple, one of the things that a bill like this why it becomes interesting is the revenue estimate, because the amounts, the 10,000, 20,000, it's scalable. I mean, we could make it 2,500 and 5,000, and I would assume that would cut the revenue estimate, essentially in half. Or we could scale it so that some of the categories would not be covered. So when a bill comes like that, we have some choices to make that aren't just yes and no.
Agreed, Chair.
You
Yeah,
understand?
I
what
do 100%, and I
Yeah,
was
you
gonna, in my
understand that.
closing remarks, I was gonna mention
So
that.
I just want you
Yeah. Any help
to
would be
know that
appreciated.
although this revenue estimate is daunting,
Yeah.
it's, almost, well, it's over 50 million in these two bienniums. So that's, that actually, maybe not in 2023, but in 2025, that's a huge chunk. So, but we appreciate your advocacy for our firefighters and our rescue and our volunteer rescue workers. And I know that it's not just in greater Minnesota about getting volunteers for these services, and local communities, have focused mostly on their when someone is vested in their pensions. Used to be a very long time, and that was in recent years, and at least in the when I talked to the fire chiefs in the we have one that's consolidated, West Metro, but then we have Golden Valley and Robbinsdale and Plymouth, they all look to decreasing the time for vesting. And they understand that when they get these volunteers and the on-calls, that it is, it's a family exercise as well. And when they are recruiting, they often ask the spouse or partner of the person who is applying to come in for an interview as well, so that that partner or spouse and children understand when that a weekend may be disrupted, a call may come in the middle of the night, and those folks have to be available to serve at that time. So we greatly, I think every single community greatly respects the volunteers. And in Minnesota, and you maybe don't, you know this too, Minnesota is the only state that has this system. Other states, the emergency workers, the firefighters, they are all professionals. I mean, they're full-time salaried people. So, but Minnesota is unique. It truly is. So we appreciate your bringing this bill on behalf of the service that they provide for us. And Senator Barr, did you have comment or a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Draheim, thanks for the bill. This kind of highlights needs and wants, a difference there. I like the idea where you're going. We have had a lot of conversations over the last few years about how we keep our volunteer services in rural Minnesota alive and thriving. My question, in the bill, the tax exemption of $10,020 for if both spouses, and you've got all the definitions on the back page, definition number 3, line 2.1 through 2.3. You have a part-time rescue worker, 40 hours in a tax year. So my question, would somebody who only volunteers part-time, 40 hours in a tax year, be eligible for the $10,000, or would this be up to the $10,000 would be if you've earned less? You know, if you say you only volunteer like every Saturday or something on an on-call basis, or you only have a handful of calls and you make, say, $5,000 in recompense for your services, would you still get the $10,000, or would it be up to the maximum that you have earned as a volunteer EMS or fire person during the calendar year?
Senator Draheim.
Thank you, Chair. And we could sure ask council, but my understanding is they would qualify for the full deduction. as drafted. And is that something we can look at? Definitely. But, you know, I think in some rural areas that there's sparse populated, they might not have a ton of calls. And they might have a whole bunch of people on the volunteer staff, but they don't all respond. They might work in a different community, might not be close by, et cetera. But when they're needed, they're needed. If there's a grass fire or a structural fire. And, you know, most of these departments don't have the equipment that our bigger towns have. So a lot of times it's 3, 4 volunteer fire departments at one fire. And that might only happen once a year, twice a year, et cetera. But they need all hands on deck at that time. So they do want the people, you know, when I go to sporting events, you know, as most of you know, my son plays a lot of sports. And who is the EMT on the field? It's a volunteer firefighter. And they're not paid. You know, that's volunteer. So I think it's hard, and I think it's a great question, and I don't know if I have a complete answer to that. How do you balance that part-time versus full-time? Do you have a kind of a 2-stage discount to lower the cost to the state? We definitely can look at that. I think most volunteers would appreciate any help that we can give them. And I think the people trying to recruit and retain would appreciate that. So I think that's definitely something we can look at if that's what it takes to get it across the finish line.
Senator Barr.
Madam Chair, Senator Draheim, that's kind of where I was going with that. If somebody volunteers 40 hours, maybe we can put a equivalent of, if it's all volunteer, you can put an equivalent of up to, just to help the revenue estimate and help get it across the finish line, because I think this is something that would definitely help outstate. And my daughter does this in rural Illinois, so I'm very familiar with sit with the pager. The pager's tied to you at all times. When you're on the call list, you have to go, and she might get a call once a week, but you're tied to the pager, and when it's time to go, it's time to go. And she's EMS, so, you know, it may be a car accident. My dad was volunteer fire department, and they had the pump truck. So they went to every fire that was within a 50-mile radius. Yep. Other people would show up with hoses and well, they had the tank truck.
Yep.
So they would run with that. So it was the combination of all of these little pieces. So I definitely understand where you're coming from. I'm just trying to help you with getting over the finish line with this.
Chair, if I could, Chair. I just wanted to thank.
Of course, Senator Draheim.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Senator Barr, and thank your family for their volunteering. You know, I'm open. I just think as a body, we have to figure out how to help this area. And I know a lot of people are working on it. I'm not the only one. This isn't the only solution out there, but I think this is a doable solution, and I think it would have a real effect. So hopefully we can work it into your budget, Chair Rest, your challenging year that you'll have. But I think it is a priority, and I think we have to do something. So I'm open for ideas.
Senator Nelson.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Draheim, thank you for bringing this bill forward. We know that volunteers are absolutely critical to, especially our smaller communities across this state. They're very important in my district, in many of my communities. And I just wanted to thank you for bringing this forward, and also note that volunteers are the backbone not only of our fire departments, EMS many times, and without the volunteers, we're seeing some real challenges. And you really can't measure the dedication of a volunteer in these particular activities, willing to, in some cases, put themselves at risk as a volunteer to go help their neighbor. That's just immense. And so I just wanted to offer some other ideas that have been thrown out here at some point that might be helpful, because I really appreciated what Chair Rest said. It's scalable, which gives us a lot of flexibility in how we can take a step in the direction I think we know we need to go and should go, but we have constraints. And some of those, just for you to consider, Senator Draheim, some of those scalability ideas were already mentioned by Senator Barr, but some of the things that we're also looking at in sparsely populated areas have to do with also looking at that sparsity, the number of people per square mile, and somehow determining in those very areas as so defined, however you would define that sparsity factor, that could also play in to the award or the tax credit. So just to consider, there are many ways, and one thing you mentioned, sparsity issues a lot, and that is something that can be very helpful in determining either where this should go or how much or to whom. So, or also mention, the other option that was mentioned was, or the question, well, what's the volunteer who might volunteer once in 6 months and a volunteer who might go out every week? And I think those are things too that can be figured and factored maybe into the text of your proposal. So, but thank you for bringing this. It is very much needed, very much needed.
Senator Housechilds?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Draheim, for bringing this bill. Every time EMS or first responders gets brought up, I usually try to state what I always state, which is the big challenges that we face in greater Minnesota when it comes to first responders, as you're well aware. This is a compounding effect, and it's really, to me, an equity issue about core services. What we have is a situation where there is inequities in the ability for folks' lives to be saved depending on their zip code. For example, where I live in Hermantown, we are served by the best hospital in the world, Mayo's ambulance service. But you drive 30 minutes north, and all of a sudden, you're in a service area that's provided by a local community of 500 people trying to pay on their property taxes for a service that is inadequate, can't find the volunteers, can't pay for it, and they're going into debt in order to do that. Why should that arbitrary line exist? The reason it exists is because the southern part of that line is profitable. So services are buying these licenses to provide the best services in the world to the profitable areas and then shoving it off on our local governments and our rural communities where it's not profitable. That is a common good problem. That is a government problem that demands a solution. And we worked on an aid package last session that I was really proud to work on across the aisle and really appreciate the unanimous support that we got. I'll be bringing forward an aid package that would be ongoing this session that I'm really looking forward to working on. But what I really appreciate about what you're bringing forward, and similar to what Senator Weber brought earlier this week on childcare, is we're looking at sort of multifaceted approaches to tackling these problems. We can talk about aid packages, we can talk about tax relief for the volunteers. I think we need to look at these big challenges that we face and figure out how we can target different efforts in order to address the challenges. But when you look at rural communities, it's because we have an aging population, we have further distances, the reimbursement rates that we get on government-provided insurance is not paying the rates that they need for those services, and then you're relying on volunteers to provide them. And I think we need to have a serious conversation in Minnesota about whether or not we treat EMS and first responders as essential service. We don't do it to our police. We don't have volunteer police. We don't have volunteer, other core services that we need. But when it comes to first responders, we decided that we should rely on this volunteer service. And I'm really proud of those people. I meet with them all the time, and they're really proud of the work that they do. But we as a government, I think, need to make a decision of whether or not we're going to value that work and value people's lives being saved, regardless of their zip code. So I really hope that we can continue to work on that this session. I love the ideal of scalability on this bill, and I want to work with you and the others on this committee. I really hope, Madam Chair, despite our budget challenges, that we do take this issue seriously and find a way to do something on this. So really appreciate you bringing it forward.
Thank you, Senator Housechilds. Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I concur with Senator Hochschild. I think, value, and we need to think about this. Madam Chair, I think we need to figure out how to get a piece of this into the bill to at least get a start in this area. I represent a rural area, and it's been said very well. And for all of the mandates and other hurdles that our potential volunteers have in our rural areas, there's not enough incentives to offset the hurdles in front of them in order to get them to the point to volunteer to do what is a critical function within the state. So whatever we can do to get this in the bill, and I realize it's probably going in the wrong direction in terms of numbers, but I would be willing to work with you to scrutinize the other parts of the very large budget area we have to offset this and more, Madam Chair.
You want a lot of things in this bill, Senator Drazkowski.
What's that?
You want a lot of things that is going to be in this bill, Senator.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I don't want too that we already do.
We'll see.
So I'll help you
We'll see how you
identify those,
vote in
Madam
the
Chair. Maybe
final
we'll find
bill.
some that we can agree on. But we got to figure out a way to get this into the bill, and that might mean we have to say no or partial no, or at least turn back the dial a little bit on some other things we do in government already here within the tax area. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Drazkowski. If you look at the revenue analysis detail, I think you have that in front of you. Just who does this affect and how many people? 17,300 Minnesotans are identified as volunteer or are paid on-call firefighters. Another 2,500 are volunteer ambulance service personnel, and about, 400 Minnesotans are volunteer EMR. So we're talking about over 20,000 Minnesotans that are engaged in these activities of service. Anything else? Senator Draheim, I think you've seen a very positive response to your bill. The challenge is quote, the cost. So we will be certainly looking at it. Do you have any final comments?
Just a quick comment, Senator Rest. I appreciate the time and the discussion from everybody. I think we're all in agreement we have to do something. What it is will be the challenge. How do we pay for it, obviously? But, you know, multiple letters that I received on this concept were, you know, I get 2 a.m. call to go put out a barn fire. I get $15. You know, most of these small town firefighter departments have really 30-year-old equipment. And I'm not just talking the fire trucks. I'm talking the personal gear, the protective gear that they wear to go into a fire. I think we need to do more. I think, like Housechild said, we need to prioritize this across the state, no matter what the size of the community or the tax bracket of the community. And I look forward to working with you in the future.
Senator Housechild, your bill would be even more enthusiastically received if your authorship was bipartisan. So I invite members of the tax committee to contact you.
Perfect.
On the DFL side. And that, first of all, that would be me, if you would add my name as a co-author in your bill.
I would really love that, Chair Rest, and anybody else that would like to be on it. I think it's
Sure.
a good possibility we can get something done.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there anything further? Then Senate File 431 will be laid over for consideration in the omnibus tax bill. Senator Klein. Oh, he's already there. Okay. Senator Klein brings us Senate File 345. Senator Klein, is this where we can discuss ruffed grouse?
Madam Chair, you certainly can. This is the
If you would
moment.
do that, I think it's a bird that's all over the United States. It's really has very interesting description, and I believe it is well, I'll let you go ahead with it, but it's a very, very interesting idea that's coming to us from Ducks Unlimited. Senator Klein.
And Madam Chair, as we begin Senate File 345, I'd first like to offer the A1 amendment, which changes words like pheasant and quail into upland game bird. So we can talk about that term too, if you like, Madam Chair. I move the A1.
Senator Klein offers the A1 amendment. After, we'll put this on and then hope you'll include the impact of it in your discussion of your bill. All those in favor of the A1, please say aye.
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 All those opposed? Aye. The motion prevails and the A1 amendment is adopted. Senator Klein, if you'd take us through your bill. It's just adding one section to the laws, to the statute. Go right ahead.
Madam Chair and Committee, thank you for hearing Senate File 345. This would provide, there is only one section, and I will go through Section 1. It would provide an exemption for sales to a nonprofit bird preservation organization for items used in the state to preserve, restore, or maintain waterfowl or upland game bird habitats. And I would like to thank the co-authors, bipartisan co-authors I have from this committee. The nonprofit bird preservation organization, as you'll hear from my testifier, is a 501c3 organization whose primary purpose is to support the life cycle of waterfowl or upland game birds through maintaining habitats in Minnesota. Section 1 also describes items that this sales tax exemption would not apply to, including construction materials, lodging, or leasing of a motor vehicle. Madam Chair, as this committee has encountered repeatedly, this sales tax was allowed under previous rules until the Department of Revenue revised its application after 2007. And the testifier will speak more to that. Also, with regard to your specific question about the definition of an upland game bird, I am also going to turn that over to the expertise of the witness.
Okay, we have your witness. Is Mr. Peterson. Welcome to the committee. We're pleased to have your testimony. Could identify yourself for the record.
Sure. Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you for your service and time today. My name is Mark Peterson. I live in Columbus, Minnesota, and have been a volunteer with Ducks Unlimited for over 35 years. I was state chairman in 2003, 2004. In 1999, with my experience as a certified public accountant, I assisted our national staff in obtaining a sales tax exemption in Minnesota. I am here today to offer my support in obtaining sales tax exemption again through statute, as our exemption that we obtained in 1999 has been revoked by the Department of Revenue. I understand the Department of Revenue revoked our exemption in July of 2023 based on their relatively recent interpretation of the Minnesota Supreme Court case known as Under the Rainbow, along with their understanding of how Ducks Unlimited is organized and operated. The Under the Rainbow case is a ruling from 2007 related to a property tax issue with a daycare provider. The Department of Revenue provided a revenue notice in 2021 that extended their interpretation of this ruling to sales tax exemption for charitable organizations. This interpretation dramatically narrowed the definition of a charitable organization that qualifies for sales tax exemption. Our efforts to convince the Department of Revenue that Ducks Unlimited still meets the requirements for exemption have not been successful. At the suggestion of the Department of Revenue, we are requesting a specific exemption via statute rather than pursuing this further in tax court. The Department of Revenue has been very helpful in drafting the proposed bill and has assured us the language in this bill would result in sales tax exemption for Ducks Unlimited and certain other bird preservation organizations, who we happen to frequently partner with on conservation projects. Ducks Unlimited is a 501c3 organization that receives charitable contributions from its members and supporters. These contributions are typically leveraged against federal and state grants to fulfill its mission of conserving, restoring, managing wetlands and associated habitats for North America's waterfowl. These habitats also benefit other wildlife and people. Ducks Unlimited has invested more than $140 million in Minnesota since its inception, leading to the restoration of over 241,000 acres of wetlands and other conservation lands, which has improved water quality, wildlife habitat, and outdoor recreational opportunities for all Minnesotans. This tremendous conservation work done by DU and other bird conservation organizations will be unnecessarily stunted if Senate File 345 is not enacted into law. On behalf of over 50,000 DU members and staff in Minnesota, I encourage you to support this legislation. Sales tax exemption will allow DU to do more work and provide greater benefits to the state than we would without exemption. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Is there any discussions or questions? I have one. We usually don't use changes in statute as a remedy for litigation. It is seen to bias the court when that happens. But you mentioned that the Department of Revenue is encouraging you to, or has encouraged you to approach Senator Klein to offer this bill, and I'm assuming not as an attempt to interfere in the litigation, but as an exercise in resolving a change in interpretation that the department is willing to accept and end the litigation with this change in statute. It has been done, but we want to be very clear-eyed that this committee does not interfere in ongoing litigation in district courts or in a tax court. Do you want to respond to that?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, there is no litigation right now.
Oh, I thought you said the matter was before the tax court?
In lieu of pursuing this in tax court. So if we don't get a resolution through statute, we would consider the next process, part of the process would be tax court. So it hasn't gone that far yet.
Good, because we would have a difficulty dealing with this bill if there was litigation ongoing. In fact, we wouldn't.
Right.
We could be very sympathetic, but we don't interfere. Questions? Senator Klein?
Madam Chair, the members have a revenue estimate on this provision, which costs in the range of $850,000 a year in the out years.
Okay, and there are testimonials also in your packets. Any further discussions? Seeing none. Senate File 345 as amended will be laid over without objection for consideration in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you, Senator Klein. Senator Nelson brings us Senate File 455. Senator Nelson, welcome welcome to the committee. And if you would go through your bill, Senate File 455, section by section, where you are adding particularly Section 1, what you're adding there. And I believe you also have a A1, an A2 amendment. Senator Nelson offers the A2 amendment, moves it. It's an author's amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. The motion prevails, and the A2 amendment is adopted. Now we have Senate File 455 before us as amended. Senator Nelson,
Thank
if you
you,
would explain
Madam
your
Chair.
bill.
Thank you very much for hearing the bill today. Committee, thank you for hearing the bill. I also want to thank Senator Weber for co-sponsoring this bill. And also for adopting the A2 amendment that just further clarifies that definition that we will be talking about that must include 10,000 patient encounters in a calendar year. So the bill walkthrough in front of you, we're looking at current law, Statute 297, Subdivision 7, which does allow sales tax exemptions by nonprofit hospitals, nonprofit outpatient surgical centers, nonprofit blood centers, and critical access dental providers. I believe Senator Rest had some similar legislation recently about the blood centers. So this is it's taking that current law and allowing the same sales tax exemption that we see for nonprofit hospitals, nonprofit outpatient surgical centers, nonprofit blood centers, and critical access dental providers. We would add that same exemption, and you would see in line 1.8, it adds that we're adding that same exemption for nonprofit physical rehabilitation clinics to the 4 sales tax exemptions that I mentioned to you that are in current law. And then if you look at lines 2.25 to 3.6, you will see there's a new paragraph added. That is paragraph E, of course, and then the subsequent paragraphs are relettered. Paragraph E is to allow the same sales tax exemption for nonprofit physical rehabilitation clinics. And then you'll see that it goes on and defines those. Obviously, a nonprofit providing physical therapy, occupational therapy, or speech therapy. It must also have 50% of all patients served in that most recent calendar year must be covered by medical assistance or Minnesota Care. And as noted, at least 10,000 patient encounters in the most recent year with those patients who are uninsured or who qualify to be covered by medical assistance, Minnesota Care, or home and community-based services. It also they must also offer a sliding payment scale for services, and there must not be more than 15% of its patients who are covered by private health insurance in the most recent calendar year. And it's effective for sales and purchases after June 30th of this year. I'd like to turn it over to my testifier to explain why this is important, Madam Chair. I have Dr. Melanie Brennan with me, who will explain a little bit about why this is so important for our nonprofits, rehabilitation clinics, so they can better serve Minnesotans in need.
Okay, we'll come back to questions, but Ms. Brennan, if you would identify yourself for the record, we welcome your testimony.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair and committee. My name is Melanie Brennan. I am the CEO and founder of Exercise Abilities, doing business as EA Therapeutic Health. And thank you for this opportunity. It is basic science and common sense. To lower healthcare expenditures, we need to keep people well. To keep people well, they need to move more and eat better. Do we need more research to prove this? No, it's been proven. Doctors of physical and occupational therapy are doctors of movement. We help people who are having trouble moving to move better so they can return to contributing and participating in society. When we get people moving optimally without pain, they move more and they move well. They go to the hospital less, they get sick less, they have less cardiovascular disease and diabetes,
They live longer, healthier lives. We excel at helping people regain their health, happiness, and independence. So why are we here today and why this bill? Let me start with a story for historical context. In 2001 to 2008, while working at Mayo Clinic as a spinal cord injury PT, I saw a need in our community of Rochester. I would work with my patients 3 hours a day, 7 days a week, to help them walk again and return home. Unfortunately, they would quickly be forced to leave the hospital rehab to go home, sometimes in as quick as 20 days. While I could give them specialized care at Mayo Clinic, if they went home to a small town, especially in rural areas, there was nowhere for them to continue their complex therapy because PTs there usually did sports and orthopedics PT, but were not familiar with providing neurologic rehabilitation. Even in the Med City, there were no options available for my patients to work with anyone with the skills or tools to continue their rehab journey long-term after outpatient PT ended at Mayo, which is usually too short as well, only 3 to 6 months at best. All my patients still needed help after this from me, but lacked the personal finances to pay for this care alone and had no availability of skilled therapists to do the work. So I did what every good American has the opportunity to do. I quit Mayo Clinic and started my own practice in Rochester in 2011 to improve long-term access to rehabilitation and therapeutic wellness care. At first, it was me driving around in my minivan with my 1-year-old in the back seat. I soon grew a bigger clientele and moved into the local YMCA. I hired my first staff person in 2012 and grew big enough to lease a small strip mall space in 2013. My husband and I took out a mortgage loan on our home to buy the $120,000 worth of equipment. The American dream. My clientele and staff grew quickly. I added occupational therapy and personal trainers to create a lifelong wellness model. We saw people with stroke, spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, lifelong disabling conditions, MS and Parkinson's, and anyone who needed help. And it worked. People got better. They returned to work. They continued receiving the care they needed. It is the most rewarding thing I had done professionally to date. However, in 2014, my husband came to me with a stark reality. This is all great, honey. You are paying their bills. However, and you're helping people, but you still are not paying yourself. You know we need to help with daycare expenses and to pay the business loan. He was right. I was giving everything away because I had to. Most of our patients had been injured or ill for more than 2 years. They were on Medicare, Medicaid, and had spent all their money on their care at home. I did not want to turn anyone away for their inability to pay. So instead of turning away Medicaid and Medicare insurances like most successful private practices have to do, I was accepting everyone and setting my fees at what that they could afford. I was doing the work of the government, working with a nonprofit mentality, and I loved my work. So in 2015, after extensive research, I applied to the IRS to convert my practice to a 501c3, and I've never looked back. Today, we're a bustling nonprofit with a $2.5 million expense budget and a $2.5 million income budget. We must fundraise around $400,000 a year to keep income to keep the lights on. I'm able to pay myself a modest income, yet cash flow is still always stressful. Staff are overworked and underpaid. I know this sounds terrible, but we, my awesome staff of 25, survived the stress because of the difference we're making. We saw 24,000 visits in 2024 and served over 600 unique individuals. Children to seniors. We helped a 40-year-old woman with a 20-year past TBI lose 150 pounds, get off oxygen, and avoid impending death. We helped a young girl who was a paramedic, but had a sudden rare functional neurologic disorder slowly return to full function and get back on the paramedic truck. That was a coincidence following the previous. Neither of them qualified for ongoing insurance coverage any longer. They would have been left to struggle alone with little success of improvement without us. But with our scholarship program and affordable post-insurance cash rates, they got better. So back to the bill. Why should nonprofit physical rehabilitation clinics be included on the list of sales tax exemptions today when there are only a few of us out there? My answer is that there should be one in every county. And the reason for there not being many is that it's too hard. We need every bit of help we can get to stay solvent and meet the extensive needs throughout Minnesota. In fact, EA is poised to expand and start helping other communities. However, the equipment we need for our work is too expensive, and the sales tax often makes them unattainable. I did bring with me an example of our sales tax for our wish list just for 2025. Our equipment that we need this year alone is $481,000. The sales tax on that will be $45,000. I also, our grantors and donors are giving and often support equipment acquisition. However, most will not pay the sales tax. You will see this year alone that we will have to come up with that $45,000. EA does not qualify for any federal or state grants for the work we do. Insurance payment rates have not increased to match the cost to deliver care. Medicare pays me the same rate that they did in 1999. It's an uphill journey. I've applied 3 times to the Minnesota Department of Revenue for sales tax exemption, but was denied all 3 times, with the statement that we do not meet the requirements for a purely charitable organization. I was told on the phone that only churches and schools qualify for sales tax exemption in Minnesota and to stop applying. Today, I am asking you to consider adding nonprofit physical rehabilitation clinics to the list of exemptions because we are doing good work for you, the government, and we are purely charitable. We will use this exemption to continue to do good work, to expand this work to other communities, and to encourage other compassionate rehab therapists to open their own nonprofit rehab clinics. Just like we know that keeping teeth free of decay helps keep people more productive in society, we know keeping people moving will keep them out of the emergency room. We need physical rehabilitation clinics in every town so that all people of all financial standing and insurance ability can continue to receive the care that benefits them most. Thank you for considering us and giving us this big rope to help pull us over the line from struggling to where the money's coming from, to come from, and to be able to focus on just doing our work and making a difference in Minnesota.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are there questions or comments for Senator Nelson or the witness? I would just note that there are 19, where did I see that? There are 19 501c3s that would be eligible for the sales tax exemption, so it's a small amount. Senator Drazkowski, you have a comment or a question?
A question, Madam Chair. I'm just curious, maybe Senator Nelson knows why we limit it to 10,000 interactions or whatever that term is. Does that limit, obviously it limits the size of the facility. What does that mean for small rural Minnesota facilities?
Senator Nelson.
Madam Chair, well, first, the exemption that we are seeking is the same as the other 4 exemptions we have that are often for those facilities in rural Minnesota. And my understanding is that providing at least 10,000 patient encounters in the most recent calendar year was added to ensure that it is who are uninsured. Maybe I didn't make that clearly enough. It's to clearly state that this is to help serve those who are uninsured or who qualify for medical assistance or Minnesota care. So, in other words, this is so that this exemption is focused to help those who are on the government-paid insurance programs, which do not pay the cost to provide services. And so these are the folks that this is focusing on. It must be in another 50% of those patients must be have medical assistance or Minnesota care. So I think it's important to have a number there. I'll ask Ms. Pollack maybe exactly where the 10,000 came from, but I think the point is we don't want, I would be reluctant if there were 5 patients and somebody was just serving their neighbors around the block. And this is along the same lines that we do with critical access dental hospitals as well. So it's a way to help our medical entities stay in business, even though they're serving majority of patients whose coverage does not pay for the cost of care. And that's what critical access mental hospitals do. That's what nonprofit hospitals do, nonprofit outpatient surgical centers, and this is just adding to that. But I'll ask Ms. Pollack, Madam Chair, if there is a specific reason for the 10,000.
Ms. Pollack.
Madam Chair, Senator Nelson, I can't speak to the exact reason for that exact number, except that it came up as we were developing the bill.
Yes.
Senator Drazkowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thanks, Senator Nelson. I don't know either. I don't know. I just know we've got at least one in my district that is trying to, one hospital in my district that's trying to add this type of facility on. And if this language is somehow limiting them, that's probably not in the interest of what we want to do in rural Minnesota. So I do want to make certain that if this goes forward, that we're not somehow hamstringing those opportunities down the road.
Madam Chair.
Senator Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Drazkowski, no, it would not. You will note in the current legislation, each entity has its own paragraph that describes that. So this is specific in this bill to describing this exemption. So but it would lead to where you might choose to bring in exemption that is for a specific case as well. I think as policymakers, we want to, as we look at these exemptions, we want to make sure that those exemptions are helping, in a sense, make that care sustainable, where those providers can stay in business, see patients, even though the majority of those cases are government paid, which are not necessarily paying the cost of the care. So I do not find it would be limiting at all, because it's specific to this instance right here, to the rehabilitation centers.
May I comment?
Any further questions or comments?
Madam Chair, may I comment? Over here. May I comment? Madam Chair?
Of course.
I think it does,
You
the
need to
10,000.
address me
Oh, sorry,
before you
Madam
do
Chair,
that.
yes, thank you. I think that the $10,000 or 10,000 visit number does establish some credibility of a certain size. It wouldn't be a 1 or 2 practitioner operation needing to do 10,000 visits, but 10,000 visits, like we do 24,000 with 25 staff. So I would estimate about 10 staff, and it allows that organization to work up to that level before the sales tax exemption would be granted.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Then Senate file.
Madam Chair, might I make just a few closing
Oh,
comments?
of course, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I just wanted to mention that, I think this, in a sense, is equity in healthcare. We want to make sure that rehabilitation services remain accessible to individuals with the greatest need, regardless of their ability to pay and regardless of where they live. And as you noted, Madam Chair, for the committee, the economic impact or the revenue estimate is very small. Some would say negligible, but about $50,000 for those 19 that would qualify. But really, I think there's an unknown economic impact on Minnesotans whose lives would be better. It would improve patient outcomes, and there would be an economic impact. We might not be able to measure it, but in reducing the amount of hospitalizations, reducing the amount of needed further medical services. And so I think the economic impact is key. And then also, just to note the last thing, Madam Chair and Committee, is that this just aligns with existing policy. And if the bill is structured in a very interesting way in the fact that you can see there's a paragraph for each of these similar areas in the medical world that we are treating as with the exempt sales tax exemption, and each paragraph is very specific to that entity. And as I said, this is simply adding one more paragraph that would allow for these rehabilitation clinics, which I think would serve our people well. I think it would help, even in cases, lower the cost of recurring health care. And I also think it would allow more of these to stay in areas where maybe there isn't enough profit to stay open, to keep your doors open. Just removing that sales tax could be the difference between closing a facility or hiring another staff person to work with Minnesotans who need this care. So I'd ask for your consideration.
Thank you, Senator Nelson. Anything further? Seeing none, Senate file 455 as amended will be laid over without objection for consideration in the omnibus tax bill. Thank you, Senator Nelson. Next week, Senator Weber and I have agreed on a with advice from our staff on the topics that we'll have before us. And Senator Weber will be chairing on the 4th. We're going to have a presentation on property taxes, a more of a deeper dive than a mere overview. And on the 5th, we'll be dealing with income tax topics. And on the 6th, tax increment financing, the first day, first hearing on TIF. We'll probably have at least 2 more hearings on TIF bills. So without further ado, we have no further business. The committee is adjourned.